A very good morning to all of you. I welcome you all to Ansarkari, and I hope that you all must be doing great. So, in this video, we'll be analyzing different newspapers from the perspective of the UPSC Civil Services examination, and we'll be analyzing different important articles for the same. So, let's start with the analysis. So center is going to reconsider safe harbor clause, which is there in the IT law. So let's understand what is this safe harbor clause. And in a new Digital India Act, it will be a comprehensive overhaul of the country's cyber laws, and many rounds of consultations they will be held before it is introduced in the parliament. So fundamental speech rights cannot be violated by any platform, but there is certainly a case that can be made that weaponization of disinformation is not the same as free speech, and that needs to be addressed. So it is saying that the case of weaponization of disinformation. So basically, be coming up with the Digital India Act of 2023, which is a broad overhaul of the Information Technology Act 2000. So basically, we're updating it in the form of a new Digital India Act of 2023. And there would be multiple rounds of discussions. Only that it would be after that it would be introduced in the parliament. So the government is reconsidering a key aspect of cyberspace, that is safe harbor, which is the principle that the so-called intermediaries on the internet, they're not responsible for what the third parties post on their websites. So that is basically what is the safe harbor clause, that basically if any third party is posting something on social media or on their website, then the so-called intermediaries, they are not responsible for what the third parties would be posting there. And this is a principle that allows the social media platforms to avoid the liability for the posts that are being made by the users on different social media platforms. So safe harbor has been reined in recent years by regulations such as Information Technology Intermediary Guidelines and Digital Media Ethics Code rules of 2021. So the safe harbor clause, it is already a part of these rules, and it requires platforms to take down the post when ordered to do so by the government or when required as per the law. So if they are found in violation, if the post and the content that is being posted on any particular platform, if they are found in violation of any law, so then they would have to be taken down from that particular platform. And recently, we also had the grievance appellate committees that have been formed. 3 of them have been formed, and they've been established to take up the content complaints by the social media users. So that is their function. So actor director Satish Kaushik, he passes away. It was because of a heart attack. So it is very important to understand what are the factors that we are seeing so many deaths because of heart attacks. What is like causing the higher frequency of heart attacks, and is it basically because of the change in lifestyle, inadequate sleep? Basically, that can be one of the reasons. And moving forward, so different states, they are planning for bill against online gaming, and Tamil Nadu is one of them. So we need to look into that at pan-India level. Do we have any regulation? Do we have any law for regulating the online gaming sector or not? And what are those laws? So you need to be aware about that. So the long lost moth species, it is again caught on camera in the Tamil Nadu forest. So in this picture, you can see it was rediscovered in the Tirunelveli district in 2020. So it was basically 2 researchers from Tamil Nadu. They have spotted a rare moth species for the first time in India in the buffer zone of the Kalakanad Munduthurai Tiger Reserve after it was last sighted 127 years ago in Sri Lanka in 1893. So it has been rediscovered after 127 years. So that is there regarding them. And apart from that, so Supreme Court acquits a man convicted of then minor wife's assault. So Supreme Court has acquitted a man who was convicted of the sexually assaulting his wife when she was a minor over 10 years ago. And the fact that the woman and her parents told the court that the relationship it was consensual and she was not kidnapped helped the man got scot-free. So these were the two main reasons, that it was consensual and she was not kidnapped. However, she was a minor, and the trial court in Karnataka, it had convicted the man under the Prevention of Children from Sexual Offences Act for 10 years rigorous imprisonment, but he has been let free by the Supreme Court on these two major reasons. And apart from that, before the POXO Act, the High Court had, however, altered the conviction from the offense under the POXO Act to Section 376, that is regarding rape of the IPC. So High Court justified that the alleged incident, it happened a month before the POXO Act came into existence, and so the law would not apply in this case. So this is one reason that High Court said that at that point of time when this incident took place, when the assault took place, the POXO Act had not been enacted at that particular point of time. So you cannot use this particular act to convict a person. And POXO Act was implemented from November 2012, while the incident in question, it occurred in September 2012. So that is one fact. And it was an unviable conviction because a bench which was led by Justice B.R. Gavai referred to how sexual intercourse in marriage would not amount to rape under the penal code. So, in the result, the conviction is not sustainable and the appellant is acquitted of the charges charged with. So, he is directed to be set at liberty, and the order in this case proceeds to top court scheduled hearing. So, basically, we are discussing this article because another topic, that is rape in a marriage. Is it really like if you get married and if you are raped, so will it be really considered a rape or not, is the main debatable question that is like we're not clear with. So here this is one sort of an incident, that's why we discussed that what were the reasons why a person was let free and why POXO Act could not be used in this particular case. So antibiotic drugs administered on livestock cut carbon in the soil and affect the climate. Antibiotic drugs that are being administered in the livestock, they cut carbon in soil and they also affect the climate. So let's understand how. So researchers at the Center for Ecological Sciences, Indian Institute of Science, they have found that grazing by the livestock leads to lower carbon storage in the soil compared to grazing by the wild herbivores. So this is one thing, and you should be knowing about this sentence, that grazing, it leads to release of carbon from the soil. So the carbon storage in the soil gets reduced because of grazing activities. And in a study that was conducted in the Spiti region of the Himalayas and which was published in the Global Change Biology CES researchers, they found that this difference appears to be due to the use of veterinary antibiotics such as tetracycline on livestock. So the researchers, they said that when they were released into the soil through dung and the urine, these antibiotics alter the microbial communities in the soil in ways that are detrimental for the sequestration of carbon. So basically, when livestock, they are administered with antibiotics, and after that the dung and their urine, when it is deposited in the soil or over the soil, the because of the microbial communities that are present in the soil, and these antibiotics, they in a way they alter those microbial communities in the soil, and that is another way how they are affecting the carbon present in the soil and even the climate. So today livestock, they are most abundant large mammals on the earth. And if the carbon stored in the soil under the livestock, it can be increased by even a small amount, then it can have a very big impact on the climate mitigation also. So we need to think of ways how we can increase carbon storage in the soil and prevent the release of carbon mainly because of grazing activities. And also we need to check on the use of antibiotics on the livestock population. So that is the case here. And talking about the carbon use efficiency, so the study, it states that all the soils from the wild and the livestock areas, they had many similarities, but they differed in one key parameter, which is called the carbon use efficiency, which determines the ability of microbes to store the carbon in the soil. So that is what the meaning of carbon use efficiency is, the ability of the microbes to store carbon which are present in the soil. And the soil in the livestock areas, they had 19% lower carbon use efficiency, soil in the livestock areas. So this is one of the trend as per the study and the results. So antibiotics such as tetracycline, they are long lived and they can linger in the soil for even decades. So that is, we can say, that is the scale of impact they can have, that is the intensity of impact they can cause, because their life cycle is very long. Farmer distress, falling prices, and failing hopes. So on the one side, we are seeing that wheat prices are surging, and on the other, we are seeing onion prices, they are crashing because of, we can say, higher amount of supply this season. So why onion and potato cultivators in Uttar Pradesh, Maharashtra, and Gujarat, they are at breaking point, which produce being sold at way below the cost of production, hitting them with debt and uncertain future. So the prices of onion and potatoes, they are right now below the MSPs, and also they are less than their cost of production. So obviously they are incurring a loss, and we know that farmers, they have to take debt, so this would be pushing them more into debt, and it is very, we can say, threat to their livelihoods. So farmers, they have no control over the selling price, obviously, and we also have no control over the ever rising cost of labor, pesticides, irrigation, and freight. So because of majorly overproduction and oversupply as per the demand, mainly this is the reason why the prices, they are crashing. So Asia's biggest wholesale onion market, it handles 3,000 tons of onions a day, and they hoped that they would get around rupees 400 to 500 per quintal for their yield from their agricultural land at Maharashtra. So they reached the market at night and lined up in the truck queue. So they have to stand night long and have to wait for their turn for selling their harvest. So that is the plight of the farmers they are going through. So there are different case studies here, and majorly it is talking about Uttar Pradesh and Maharashtra. So in the context of Maharashtra, there are like onion cultivations, and farmers from Nasik, they're responsible for more than 30% of the India's the onion production. So only 30% of India's total onion production is from the Nasik region, which is there in Maharashtra. So that is one thing which you can remember for your clarity, and you can find out about the role of the National Agricultural Cooperative Marketing Federation of India Limited. So even like they had started the procurement, and the state government would support the farmers, but our farmers, they feel that this is not true, that they would be getting the support of the state governments regarding the same. So media raids and breaking the silence on press freedom. So in upholding press freedom, the higher judiciary needs to revive the doctrine of effect and consequence and act without fear or favor while considering the canvas of heavy-handed executive actions. So This thing needs to be kept in mind. And on 14th Feb, we saw that the Income Tax Department carried out a survey action on the offices of the British Broadcasting Corporation in New Delhi and in Bombay also. And after continuing this survey for 3 days, so here you need to be like we discussed in one of the videos, the difference between a survey and a raid. So here it was, in case of BBC, it was a survey which was carried out for 3 days. A press release was issued by the Central Board of Direct Taxes, citing an alleged evasion of taxes on the remittances and discrepancies in BBC's transfer pricing mechanism. And many media organizations, such as the Press Club of India, they have described the raids as deeply unfortunate, and the Editors Guild termed as intimidation. So, even those who may favor the tax survey will confess that the tax scrutiny is a natural outcome of the BBC's two-part documentary series, which was India, the Modi Question, which the BBC released on January 17, 2023. So, chilling message that at the root of these survey actions, it is an attempt to instill fear and self-censorship that begins with knocking on the doors of the offices of journalists. And today, these actions, they have become sinister as they now involve the seizure of devices as well. So, hence, an unpleasant surprise turns into severe shock when journalists, as in the case of BBC, they are treated as potential criminals. So that is basically, they feel that in a way, this is one of the ways of instilling fear in minds of the journalist and promoting, self-censorship through these like surveys and different raids that are being carried out. So half truth in the executive response. So in a parliamentary response dated 10th of August 2022, the Ministry of Home Affairs has stated that since police and law and order, they are the topics within the competence of the state governments, it cannot centrally maintain the device seizures of the journalist. So this is a half truth for two reasons. That first is that the Crime in India report queries data from the state governments and can easily be extended to include data on device seizures of the journalists. And second, many of the searches and seizures have been performed even by the central agencies such as the Income Tax Department, and such a record can be maintained and published by the Ministry of Finance. So such institutional evasion only increases suspicion about the bona fides of prosecutions and also represents a lack of intent for any studied consideration by the executive, particularly the union government. So, what is the way out? So, in the absence of such checks and balances, and also the unlikely event of systematic reforms, what is the role that constitutional courts play in such instances? So, here there is adequate room for the application and development of doctrines for the press freedom. And first cluster requires the application of the fundamental right to privacy drawn from the Supreme Court's judgment in case Puttaswamy versus Union of India 2017. And more than 5 years since the judgment it was first propounded, its application to the criminal justice system here is awaited in cases of electronic evidence also. So that is in a way, basically, the author feels that it violates their fundamental right to privacy in case of when there is electronic evidence seizures. So resurrecting the DK Basu guidelines as relevant for a digital India may also be a way out. And stricter procedural safeguards, they are required today due to digitization, as the Supreme Court of India of the United States, Supreme Court of the United States, it noted in one of the cases, it said that cell phones differ in both a quantitative and a qualitative sense from other objects that might be kept on an arrestee's person. And such guidelines will only provide partial relief. So that is one case, and it will require case specified and clear pronouncements on facts that consider how legal processes they are abused in the device seizures of the journalist. And this recent trend is an adaptation of an old template where a muscular executive sidesteps a direct response to a critical article and, in bad faith, directs the legal scrutiny in the publication itself. So, such mischievous government actions, they have been considered by the Supreme Court in several press freedom cases, leading to the partial expansion of the direct and inevitable to the effect and consequence test. So the Supreme Court needs to revive and apply the doctrine of effect and consequence to consider a broader canvas of executive actions that will shape the practices of our criminal courts. For instance, in this BBC case, there's a relevant fact for a court to determine is not limited to the allegations of tax evasion only, but whether the scrutiny is prompted by a documentary that is critical of the Prime Minister. So that can be also the other side of the coin in this instance. And today, for a free and fair press, not only the journalists, but even our courts, they need to act without fear or favor. So freedom of press needs to be maintained, although there are certain reasonable restrictions to that as well. So it does not mean that if you have a fundamental right that is absolute in nature, definitely there are certain reasonable restrictions on them. So talking about India's logistics sector, so basically, firstly, you should whenever we are talking about India's logistics sector, the first thing that needs to come into your mind is uh, what are the different schemes that are being run by government, different schemes or plans and policies regarding reducing the cost of logistics in India and making the system much more efficient and cost friendly. Coming to this article, in the Union Budget 2023, it has doubled the PM's Gati Shakti National Master Plan to the states from rupees 5,000 crores to rupees 10,000 crores, and it has also announced an outlay of rupees 2.4 lakh crores for the Indian Railways. So this is the first scheme that the government is running regarding the logistical sector, that is PM Gati Shakti National Master Plan. So you need to find out more about it, and already a question has been asked on this in the mains. So the plan is a transformative approach for the economic growth and sustainable development dependent on engines of roads, railways, airports, ports, mass transportation, waterways, and logistics infrastructure. So transformative approach that we are aiming for through this scheme. And also railways offer an efficient and the economic mode of logistics movement given their pan-India network. So they can play an important role in enabling a coordinated and integrated logistics system. So these are the keywords. And with the target of increasing the share of railways in the freight movement from 27% to 45% and increasing the freight movement from 1.2 billion tons to 3.3 billion tons by 2030, PM Gati Shakti provides the right platform to address the infrastructural challenges that we are having that have hampered the movement of freight by railways. So that's how it can be linked with the railways and ensure that these infrastructure challenges are overcome in a way through this master plan. So convenience over the cost. Currently, the modal mix in terms of the freight movement, it is skewed by a considerable extent towards the road transport with 65% of the freight movement by road. So in India, 65% of the freight transport is happening through the roads. And that's how we can say that we have an untapped potential in the railway sector as far as the freight transportation is concerned, because obviously we have a very large network of railways. We can make the system much more efficient through railway freight movements. So this needs to be shifted, and the effect is an increased burden on the roads and therefore significant congestion, increased pollution, and resultant logistics cost escalations. This is because we are so much that we are more than 50% of our freight movement is happening through the road transportation. So obviously it causes a lot of traffic pollution and obviously the cost increases. So the increased adoption of the railways as a mode of the cargo movement is crucial to improve India's logistics competitiveness. So we need to shift more and more towards the railway sector to make the system and to make the sector, the logistics sector, the freight movement sector, much more competitive. So a look at the comparable cost of the different forms of transportation, it suggests that freight movement cost is the highest in the road sector, and still we are dependent 65% on the road sector. So despite having the highest cost there, which is nearly twice the railway cost. So you can imagine how costly is it to transport freight and goods through the road. And in 2020-21, the coal constituted around 44% of the total fleet movement of 1.2 billion tons. So obviously this adds up to the pressure upon even the coal sector mining, followed by iron ore that was 13%, cement 10%, food grains 5% likewise. So transportation of the non-bulk commodities accounts for a very small share in the rail freight movement. So non-bulk commodities, they account for a very smaller share in the rail freight movement. And rise in the container traffic. So the convenience of moving non-bulk commodities in containers has led to an increase in the containerized traffic over the last decade. And that has grown from 7.6 million 20-foot equivalent unit in 2008 to 16.2. And globally, the railway systems, they are heavily investing in advanced rail infrastructure for quick and low-cost container movement. So even globally, we are seeing that the countries, they are investing more in the railway sector. For example, China, it uses the special trains to carry their containers that connect significant ports to the inland, and it has dedicated rail lines to move the container traffic and planned double-decker container carriages for greater efficiency. So that's what we can take away from China also. And when we talk about the Indian Railways, they are upgrading their infrastructure that we talked about as for the PM Gati Shakti National Master Plan, and also a continuous monitoring of the existing projects along with identification of the new priority areas will help in achieving the targets of the railway freight movement in case of India. So at present, these are significantly lower than other countries such as US and China. So we need to invest more in the railway sector as far as we're talking about the freight movement. And the national transport faces several infrastructural, operational, and connectivity challenges, in turn leading to a shift of the freight traffic to the road. So these are the challenges in case of the railway sector: infrastructural challenges, operational challenges, and the connectivity challenges. So these three main challenges in the railway sector needs to be addressed, and that's how we can then successfully shift towards the railways for freight movement. So we need a special entity for that. So the upcoming dedicated freight corridors along India's eastern and the western corridors and multimodal logistics park, they will ease the oversaturated line capacity constraints and improve the timing of the trains also. So dedicated freight corridors and the multimodal logistics park. So the Indian Railways, they need to improve infrastructure that is backed by adequate policy tools, and that also encourages private participation in the operation and management of the terminals, containers, and warehouses to efficiently utilize the available resources. So establishing a special entity under the railways to handle the intermodal logistics in partnership with the private sector will help in addressing the first and the last mile issue faced by the railways. So we're talking about how and what are the solutions that we are having, and with the help of which we can help basically we can successfully overcome the current challenges. So the entity, it could function as a single window for customers for the cargo movement and the payment transactions. So there are two cargo wagons in each passenger train based on industry's recommendations. Introduction of Uber-like model for one of the two cargo wagons, wherein the customer can book the wagon using an online application. It could help in increasing the utilization rate of these wagons. So that is also a wonderful solution, but obviously firstly we need to work upon the current challenges that we are having for materialize this thing. So Indian Railways, they may keep operating the other wagons and the way it is done currently until the success of the proposed model is established. So an integrated logistics infrastructure with first and the last mile connectivity is essential to make rail movement competitive with roads and facilitate exports by rail to neighboring countries such as Nepal and Bangladesh. So that is the bottom line of this article. So we see 15 to 30% of the rabi crops have been damaged in Himachal Pradesh due to deficient rains, according to the officials. So somewhere we're witnessing deficient rains, somewhere we are seeing unseasonal rains, which is causing a damage to the standing crop. And so the elusive political solution in Sri Lanka. So the deadline that Sri Lankan President Ranil Wickremesinghe set to resolve the pending ethnic question expired a month ago, and having seen several such unkept promises in the past also, Tamils contend that Southern Sinhalese establishment does not have the political will to find a just and durable political situation to the problem. So in early Feb, a group of saffron-clad Buddhist monks they gathered near the Sri Lankan parliament, and they burnt a copy of the 13th Amendment. So this thing has like been in news a lot about the 13th Amendment. So they were registering their rage and protest after the President Ranil Wickremesinghe vowed to implement the law in full, and he had told an all-party conference that it was his responsibility as the executive to carry out the current law. So we'll be trying to understand what is this 13th Amendment all about and how is it related to India. So that is there. So for approximately 37 years, the 13th Amendment has been a part of the Constitution, and I must implement or someone has to abolish it. So basically, it is already there, like it has been successfully passed as per the law, as per their procedure. So there is the 13th Amendment is a part of their Constitution, but it is not fully implemented. And that is what is the main problem here. So, an unfulfilled promise, so neither the pledge made by the president nor the monks' reaction is new to Sri Lankans. So, obviously, this is a very long issue, and past presidents, including Mahinda Rajapaksa, they have made the same promise more than once, and monks and other reactionary groups they similarly agitated then too as well. But at the same time, Sri Lanka's Tamils who continue to demand equality, dignity, and the right to self-determination, they do not know what it might look like when the promise is indeed kept. So, despite power devolution being enshrined in the constitution for nearly 4 decades, it was an outcome of the Indo-Lanka Accord of 1987. They have never seen the piece of legislation being implemented in letter and spirit till date. So, this is another issue that is concerning the power devolution to the Sri Lankan Tamils, and even this has not been implemented in letter and spirit till date. So this was basically an outcome of the Indo-Lanka Accord of 1987, and we are in 2023, so not yet implemented. So the 13th Amendment is, and it has always been contentious, and for those Sinhalese opposing it, basically we address the people of Sri Lanka as Sinhalese because we there is also a Sinhala language also. So the Sinhalese opposing it, and the legislation is an Indian imposition symbolizing too much power to the Tamils at the provincial level and a threat to the central government in Colombo. So that is what is the concern and the reason behind why their government is not implementing the 13th Amendment, which is talking about too much of power devolution to the Tamils at their provincial level. And they feared that if such thing is done, so it would be kind of a threat to the powers of the central government in Colombo. So on the other hand, the Tamils, they have maintained that the 13th Amendment, the legislation under the Sri Lanka's unitary constitution entails very limited powers that don't amount to meaningful devolution. So this is what the Tamils, they feel that even if it is like implemented also, it would it has some missing things, and it is not, we can say, it has very limited power. It talks about very limited power being devolved to the Tamil. So all the same, some see it as a starting point in negotiating a more wholesome and durable political settlement. For the 13th Amendment is currently the only legislative guarantee of some power sharing. So I hope now you're clear with what is 13th Amendment all about and what is the current issue. And now coming to the Indian involvement. So the deadline that the President Vikram Samay set for himself to solve the national question, it expired a month ago. So the government, it held elaborate celebrations to observe its 75th year of independence, although some Sri Lankans, they still feel that they are treated as second-class citizens despite 75 years of independence, and the president's promise to implement the 13th Amendment is already fading into oblivion. So the dominant headlines in Sri Lanka today, they are about the International Monetary Fund's bailout package. So they have been successfully given this bailout package, and that has now come within touching distance after China agreed to restructure Sri Lanka's loans, and about the new wave of protests from sections who are reeling under the lingering impact of last year's economic crisis. So, at the same time, the population is also protesting who are still reeling under the impacts of the economic crisis that Sri Lanka suffered. And the other main thing is that IMF has successfully uh, given the bailout package the stipulated amount to Sri Lanka, so it would be soon given to them. And we also, like the supporters of the government, they adopted an economic recovery before everything approach. There's little indication that the country's unresolved ethnic conflict may be addressed too soon. So where does that, like, basically, while India has historically been an arbiter on Sri Lanka's Tamil national question, many in Tamil polity and community, they say both New Delhi's interest in and in the influence on this issue, they are waning. So that's where we can say that India comes into the picture. And critics, they argue that India, preoccupied with the countering Chinese influence in Sri Lanka, does little more than make customary statements and the need to implement the 13th Amendment. So what, like, where does that leave Sri Lanka's war-affected Tamil community in the north and the east? So after decades of relentless agitations and an armed struggle, they are still demanding justice, equality, and dignity, and a long pending political solution remains elusive as of now. So India top tier security partner, says the Australian Prime Minister Albanese. So he was aboard the INS Vikrant in Mumbai, and he says that bilateral ties are of increasing strategic importance while navigating the challenges of the region together. Earlier, they were in Ahmedabad. They watched the fourth test between the two nations, the India and Australia, with the Indian Prime Minister. So when we talk about the Malabar exercise, you need to be like knowing which all members are participating in the current edition of the Malabar exercise. So Australia will be hosting the exercise Malabar for the very first time, and India will also, for the first time, participate in Australia's Talisman Sabra exercise. So this is there, and that's how basically the two countries, they're trying to strengthen their relationship. And obviously Indo-Pacific region is of strategic importance, and we are seeing that here China is trying to dominate itself, specifically in South China Sea, and it is like being alleged that it is constructing some artificial islands also. So abusing someone with caste name during argument won't lead to the SC/ST Act case as per the High Court. So abusing someone with the name of their caste or uttering the caste name suddenly during an exchange by itself will not be sufficient to establish an offense under the Scheduled Caste and Scheduled Tribes Prevention of Atrocities Act unless there is intent to humiliate the victims specifically for their caste or tribal identity, as per the Odisha's High Court. So IBSA can play a vital role in reforming the digital governance, and this is as per the Diplo Foundation report. So Firstly, it is very important to know that which all countries are a part of IBSA. So it includes India, Brazil, and South Africa. So I is for India, B Brazil, S is South Africa. So which they have basically they have come together. They have formed this tripartite IBSA forum. It may also play a prominent role in the process of reforming the digital governance at a time when the digital geopolitical tensions they are showing no signs of easing. And the first tangible results from the IPSA's digital momentum could be expected during India's G20 presidency. And observing that digitization it is driving growth in IBSA economies, the foundation says that India is the leader among them with a vibrant digital economy. But digitalization also tends to exacerbate major social tensions, but that these countries face, including the digital divide. So when we're talking about digitalization or digital economy or digital India, here, talking about the challenges, yesterday only we talked about the huge digital divide between male and female and between urban and rural areas, and also the need to have digital governance that will reflect the local cultural, political, and the economic specificities. So the idea of digital inclusion becomes very important. And talking about the geopolitical tensions and basically digital governance, going by the report Digital Politics, Geopolitics, this year it will be centered on the issues pertaining to the protection of the submarine cables and satellites, production of semiconductors, and the free flow of data. So these are some of the geopolitical digital governance issues. So submarine cables and satellites, production of semiconductors, and where we see that the countries are not just India, but other countries are highly dependent upon China for the semiconductors chip supplies. And then the third thing is the free flow of data. So as we were talking about semiconductors, so a memorandum of understanding on semiconductors will help India play bigger role in electronic supply chain as per the US. So Air India's decision to purchase 220 Boeing aircraft, it will create a tremendous number of jobs in US. And apart from that, so India and US, they would sign an MOU on semiconductors that would support India's aspiration to play a leading role in the electronics supply chain. So we are trying to innovate, diversify our semiconductor partners and not just be dependent upon China. So Tripura CM rejects Motha's demand for greater Tipra land. And then there are other demands of greater Nagaland for the Nagaland state. So these are some of the issues in northeastern India. So Vice President says, who is also the ex-officio chairman of Rajya Sabha, he says that Member of Parliament's comment on Parliament on foreign soil cannot be ignored. So denigrating the comments made by a Member of Parliament about the Indian Parliament in the foreign soil cannot be condoned. And not naming any MP, he said that while the world is applauding our historic accomplishments as a functional, vibrant democracy, some amongst us, including parliamentarians, they are engaged in the thoughtless, unfair denigration of our well-nurtured democratic values. So how can we justify such wanton orchestration of a factually untenable narrative? So I hope you've got that the statement is against which member of parliament. So we'll be not naming that person. So railways gear up to fulfill the coal demand of the power sector. So coal transport by rail, it is up by 24.5% this financial year till February from the corresponding period last year, and more coal carrying wagons they have been introduced. So Assam, it sets record for most essays on a person. So the Assam Chief Minister Hemant Biswa Sharma on Thursday received a certificate from the Guinness World Records for the highest number of essays written about a single person. And the essays were handwritten, and they were on the Ahom General Lachit Borpukhan to mark his 400th birth anniversary. So he's a very famous Ahom general, and in this context, we from the state of Assam, we have also talked about the Charai Doms. So you can find out about them. So our president is on a visit to Amritsar, and she's there. The picture is there from the Golden Temple. She also visited the Jallianwala Bagh and paid tribute to the freedom fighters. So during her visit, the Shiromani Gurdwara Prabandhak Committee, the body responsible for the management of the Gurdwaras, submitted two memorandums to the president, one regarding the release of the Sikh prisoners and the other for repealing the Haryana Sikh Gurdwara Management Act of 2014. So you need to find out about what is this whole issue regarding this Haryana Sikh Gurdwara Management Act 2014. So the Russia-Ukraine war is getting more and more aggressive, and Russia is very near to capturing Bakhmut as well. So it is already like entered the eastern parts of Bakhmut. So that would basically ease the process, or it would clear the roads for Russia to enter the capital of Ukraine. So Nepal elects Ramchandra Paudel as the new president. So he basically belongs to Nepali Congress. He was elected as the president of Nepal amid increasing political instability in the country, ruled by the fragile coalitions headed by Prime Minister Pushpa Kamadel, who is famously known as Prachanda. So the issue of political instability in Nepal has been in news for a lot of, like, for a long period of time. So you need to be clear about what is the whole issue in Nepal, and because Nepal is a neighbor of India. So rights group in Ukraine, they win a Norway's Freedom Prize. So Ukrainian rights group Truth Hounds, which documents war crimes in the Ukraine conflict, was awarded the Norway's Sakharov Freedom Award. So there's going to be a full trade deal with Australia. So a comprehensive economic cooperation agreement lends great opportunities to expand the ties and expresses confidence in the timeline, citing political will. So India and Australia, they have been negotiating a comprehensive economic cooperation agreement after having reached an initial trade deal, ECTA, and the ECTA, it has already led to two consecutive reductions in the tariffs. So that's how we are basically trying to increase the trade between the two countries. So inflation to ease in financial year 2024, but monsoon is the key risk right now. Coming from our chief economic advisor, V. Anand Nageshwaram. So as we're talking about from the last 3 years, we've been having La Nina-like conditions and we had good monsoon, but this year we are expecting that it might change into El Nino. And obviously, we know that if we have El Nino, so it negatively impacts the Indian monsoon. So that can have an impact on our total food production and help in driving up the inflation. So right now, that is the main risk to the inflation. So India must prepare to curb the volatility risks of the international rupee, RBI's Rao, if the RBI's efforts towards rupee invoicing bear fruit. So local exporters and the importers, they will not need to hedge. So India needs to gear up to manage the inevitable volatility that will emerge in the foreign exchange market as the country progresses further towards internationalization of rupee. And in this context, we have talked about the importance of the Vostro accounts that majorly we are setting up with the Russian banks, and how we are basically trying to internationalize rupee. And we also talked about what the conditions which are required for a currency to get internationalized. So an international currency is one that is freely available to the non-residents, essentially to settle cross-border transactions. And in the case of rupee, this will be achieved by promoting the currency for import and export without any limits. But that will make the rupee more reactive to the global events, and that would increase the outflows, increasing the volatility at the same time. So it is now widely accepted that while internationalization and a freer capital account comes with its own set of benefits, it is not without risks at the same time. So Mr. Rao did not expand on how to manage the volatility in his comments, which were part of his keynote address at a conference which was organized by the Foreign Exchange Dealers Association of India. So India is increasingly aimed at promoting rupee-denominated trade, and that we are majorly doing with Russia right now. So last July, RBI unveiled a mechanism to settle international trade in rupees, aiming at promoting exports and facilitating imports also. So he said that there was a good amount of interest in the rupee trading arrangements the RBI was putting in place, and if the central bank's efforts towards rupee invoicing bears fruit, so then the local exporters and importers, they will not need to hedge. So new frontiers will also emerge as the Indian banks expand their presence in the offshore markets, non-residents participate more in the domestic markets, and technological changes continue to transform the way markets function. So obviously, this would basically, in a way, it would be increasing the volatility because we would be more internationally connected and we would obviously be impacted by the global events. So taking up the important things from Mint. So who really blew up the Nord Stream pipeline? So basically understanding what are the Nord Stream pipelines. So Nord Stream 1 and 2, they are undersea gas pipelines which are built to transport cheap Russian natural gas to the European countries. So Nord Stream 2, it never became operational because of the tensions over Ukraine, and Nord Stream 1 was a key artery for the supply of Russian energy to Europe. So over the course of a decade, Nord Stream 1, it supplied a third of the Europe's gas imports from Russia. And however, after Moscow's invasion of Ukraine, we saw that Russia began cutting the supplies to Europe. And in the midst of these tensions, a series of underwater explosions in September damaged both the Nord Stream pipelines, and it also caused gas leaks. So what happened in the aftermath? So recriminations, it began almost immediately. Sweden, it said that the blast may have been the result of sabotage, and given the precision with which the bombings they were carried out, experts speculated the saboteurs may have been powerful states. So Poland blamed Russia for sabotaging the pipelines, an allegation that Kremlin swiftly denied. And at the same time, Moscow, on its part, it blamed its Western opponents for sabotaging the pipelines in an effort to further cripple the Russian economy. So we know sanctions have been imposed on Russian economy post the war. So what was the economic impact of the bombings? So there was no immediate disruptions to energy flows from Russia to Europe. While many they feared that disruption of energy flows would devastate the European economies, the countries they had used Russian gas in months prior to the bombings to fill their gas reserves also. So, an unusually warm winter also reduced Europe's need for energy and staved off a disaster. So, we can say that's where climate change also helped Europe. But obviously, this is for a short time period because till the time we are having this war, only that we can say only for that particular time this climate change is helping the European economy. And what are the theories that are doing the round? So some analysts they argue that Moscow may be behind it in order to scare the Western buyers who have taken to building new pipelines. So obviously European countries they are they do not want to depend completely upon Russia for the natural gas supply. So they're making attempts. They're trying to build the new pipelines. So even others said that the Western powers, they had a strong incentive to sabotage, given how the pipelines made Europe dependent on Russia. So that's there. And lastly, what do the latest investigations reveals? So this is not much important for us. So let's move ahead. Coming to Financial Express. So RBI steps in as the short-term rate hits 4-year high. So here we're talking about the yield on the short-term bonds. So yesterday we talked about the inversion of the yield curve, wherein I explained you what do we actually mean by it. So you can visit that video again. So central bank infusion to preempt the liquidity tightness, says the expert. So inverted yield curve in this picture, you can see on a 12-month treasury bill in terms of percentage. When you talk about its yield, it has been increasing and it is at 7.43 percentage, and on 10-year bond yield it is at 7.44 percentage. So it is almost at the same level, we can say, with minor fluctuations, but we can see how sharply the yield is increasing on the short-term treasury bills. So that becomes a cause of concern, and that's why the RBI stepped in. So we saw a sharp spike. So in this graph, the green color, you can see how sharply it is increased. So this is the 3-month commercial papers, and it increased from almost 6.97 percentage to 7.8%. So even as the rates on the short-term borrowings by the companies, they have hit a 4-year high, RBI will conduct a 14-day variable repo rate auction for 1 trillion rupees on Friday. So we need to know more about the variable repo rate auctions. So this is twice the amount injected at the previous VRR auction, and it will help ease the liquidity situation also. So whenever we have an inverted yield curve, it is often believed that it is pointing towards tightening liquidity. So that's how basically RBI steps in through the variable repo rate auctions, and it is trying to ease liquidity situation, which is becoming tight due to the year-end requirements. So that is the role it has. And the rate on the 3-month commercial papers issued by the companies, excluding the non-banking financial companies, even that is increased. So we just saw that in the graph also. And the central bank may be infusing money to preempt the liquidity tightness expected on the account of the advanced tax payments. So meanwhile, the squeeze on the liquidity, that has driven up the money market rates. So obviously, with less liquidity, less money supply, the interest rate rises. So even that is also the case why we are seeing a spike in the yield on the short-term treasury bills. So our Union Power Minister said that we're ready for the summer months. All stakeholders, they must closely monitor the situation and take proactive actions to meet the electricity demand during the coming months. So we need to be ready for that, as we are expecting more extreme heat this time. So the reporting norms under the Prevention of Money Laundering Act has been tightened. So beneficial ownership to begin at 10%. So widened scope. Now banks, financial institutions, and intermediaries, they have to maintain records of all the transactions of the non-profit organizations. Next, the reporting entities, they need to register the clients being non-profit organizations or the on the Darpan portal of the Niti Aayog, and the banks, they are mandated to maintain the registration records for a period of 5 years from the closure of the account also. So in a way, these are the steps through which the norms have been tightened. So as we talk about the expectation of rise in heat this time, we are expecting a more higher amount of temperature. So this article is saying that the link between monsoon and the crop production weakens. So whenever we talk about this, we say that if like this year also we are expecting El Nino like conditions, so that would be leading to a weaker monsoon, and that's how it would be impacting the total production. But this article is saying that the link between these two things is very weak. So there is not much impact of monsoon on the total crop production. That's what it is trying to say. And deficient rains don't alter the agricultural GVA much. So that is gross value added of the agricultural sector. So irrigation and improved productivity, higher MSPs, they insulate the farmers in such situation. Irrigation, improved productivity, and higher MSPs. So when we try to understand the food grains production, so in this pictograph, you can understand. So the green one is basically showing the output in million tons. So it has been increasing. It is very clearly evident. Apart from that, the percentage change in the monsoon. You can see this, the orange line, the orange graph, it is showing the percentage change in monsoon. So even when you can see that there was a weak monsoon in this period, you can see it was a decline. We still saw that the production or the output was not impacted much, or the output did not decline proportionally. Then again, during this time period also, we saw a weak monsoon and the output has increased despite that. So through data, we are trying to say that the link between these two variables is not so strong, or it is very weak. It has become weak, we can say. And talking about the state-wise dependence on irrigation, so Punjab has the highest, that is 95%. Basically 95% of the agricultural sector is dependent upon irrigation. In Haryana, we have 90%. So obviously these are some states which are dependent upon the water intensive crops, and obviously they are dependent much upon irrigation. You can see it through the data. Next is Uttar Pradesh, then we have Bihar, West Bengal, and Tamil Nadu. And crop-wise dependence on irrigation. So sugarcane is, we can say, is the water-intensive crop. We talk about rice also, but here we are seeing a sugarcane is the, as per the crop-wise dependence on irrigation. So 95% of the sugar cultivation is dependent upon irrigation. Next, we have wheat, then rapeseed, barley, tobacco, and rice. So the FDI equity inflows, they are hit by a global slump. So we are seeing slowdown in FDI equity inflows into India. So experts, they see that the marginal improvement is going to happen in the next fiscal year. And the data is also showing for different sectors. So here, this one is for the total inflows. So it is showing the trend over the years. And when we start from financial year 2021, you can see it has been declining. And it is declined by almost 14.8 percentage points. And in order to reduce the prices of wheat, we are seeing that the Food Corporation of India, it sells almost 3 million ton of wheat since 1st of Feb. So keeping the prices under check. So we talked about this. On the one side, we are seeing how wheat prices are performing, and on the other side, how farmers are suffering from the crashing prices of onion and potatoes. So keeping prices under check, more than 1,000 bidders across 23 states participated in the auction, and the average of the wheat released by FCI was around 2,200 rupees per quintal. So yesterday itself, we talked about promoting the tourism. So we have talked about promoting rural tourism, about border tourism, and we talked about important geographical areas in the context of the border tourism also. So we'll not be taking up this thing, but you can read it in a broader sense. So granting tourism infrastructure status will provide further impetus to the growth of this sector. This can be one of the new ways, and it is talking about the new 6 P's. So, what are those 6 P's which can help in promoting the Indian tourism? So, unlocking India's immense tourism potential requires a comprehensive strategy that addresses 6 key pillars. So, I'm naming them, that is planning, place, people, policy, process, and promotion. So, we had these terms in this year's union budget. And constitutionally, too, tourism remains a state subject, and the Central Tourism Department has been battling for it to be moved to the concurrent list for policy making at the central and the state level. So, right now, it is under the state list, and these are the 6 P's which we were talking about. So, now it is time for India to turbocharge its efforts with the right policies and initiatives to feature among the top 3 travel and tourism economies globally. Talking about digital security in India, so even with a low density of secure internet servers, India still enjoys relatively high e-security among the G20 nations at 0.81 per the digital quality of as per the digital quality of life index, and the country has a similar showing as Australia, and it is comparable even with South Korea. So understand this data also. India, in the internet usage in India, it is still low as a percentage of individuals using the internet. So top 5 in G20 is Saudi Arabia, Canada, South Korea, UK, US, and Japan. Bottom 5, we have at the bottom we have India. So it is very less, like 53% of the individuals in India are using internet. It is very less. You can say almost the lowest in G20 countries at least. So e-security in India is better than some G20 peers at the same time. So that is where it is kind of a positive thing for us. So top 5 may still, we don't have India. But we have it. The score of India is 0.81. So it is like not in at least bottom 5 also. And India's secure server density, that is also low. So secure internet servers per million population in India is 478 million. So finally, coming to Indian Express, you can see in this picture the prime ministers of India and Australia in the ground. So India, it is a top tier security partner, and it is open. The basically top tier security partner and open Indo-Pacific is our need as per Australia's prime minister. So on talks table, expanding ties in the defense sector, trade, clean energy, and education are the focus areas. So officers from the vice president's staff, they've been attached to the House panels and draws criticism from the opposition. So a vice president slams the narrative, says acted after the members of the panels came to him. So 8 officers from the personal staff of the vice president and Rajya Sabha chairman have been attached to 12 standing committees and 8 department-related standing committees of the parliament. So the officers attached to the committees from the vice president's staff, they are officer on a special duty, and they've been named here. So in the order issued, the Rajya Sabha secretariat said that the officers have been attached to the committees with immediate effect and until further orders. So these officers are expected to assist the committees in their work. So in Assam, a clean village contest is being held, and winner gets 1 kilometer of concrete road. So that is creative idea of promoting clean villages. So politically exposed persons, they are being brought under the new PMLA rules, that is Prevention of Money Laundering Act, and more disclosures for the NGO. So we have already talked about the tightening norms and what the changes that have been made under the PMLA. So this is in line with the FATF recommendations also. And Financial Action Task Force, that is FATF, is the global money laundering and terrorist financing watchdog. And basically, we can find out more about it. So taxpayers are liable to pay the advance tax. So an assessee, including the salaried employee whose tax liability for the financial year as reduced by the tax deducted or collected as sources rupees 10,000 or more, and the resident senior citizen not having income from the business or profession is not liable to pay any tax. So we have already talked about the main things. Coming to the editorial page directly, no government can be long secure without a formidable opposition. So I've been raising this question that what is the importance of a strong opposition in democracy? And we have this thing that no government can be long secure without a formidable opposition. And we see that NAAC's top officials' resignation shines light on the flaws in the system to grade colleges and universities, and UGC must take corrective action for that. So all is not well in the National Assessment and Accreditation Council, the NAAC, and it is a UGC affiliated autonomous body that grades the colleges and universities in the country. And its executive committee's chairperson has resigned to safeguard the sanctity of the post to which he was appointed a little over a year earlier. And he basically has been flagging the irregularities in the Bengaluru-based agency's functioning in the days leading to his resignation. So basically, the NAAC, it relies heavily on the self-assessment by the applicant institutions. And applicant institutions, they submit a self-evaluation report, which is then validated by the NAAC's expert teams, and which is followed by the peer team visits to the institutions. And this last step has sparked the controversy in past. That is the peer visits, the peer team visits to the institutions. So NAC has dismissed the allegations and it basically released the MS University scores also. So there was this incident regarding this university after receiving a tip-off that its peer review team had been bribed. So less than half of the country's public universities and little more than a fourth of the colleges, they were NAC accredited as of 30th January. And it's evident that a large number of colleges and universities, they see the accreditation process as a burden. So this is not unexpected in a country with a well-documented resource crunch in the majority of its higher educational institutions. And there surely is a case for the peer review process to be facilitatory as suggested by the NAC's white paper. And agency has also initiated conversations on other possibilities to help the colleges improve the quality of education, but these will remain mere suggestions unless the UGC lends an ear to this autonomous body. Again, this article is about tourism. So Pentagon chief visits Israel amid the mass protest and West Bank strain. And Netanyahu has been airlifted as the protesters, they blocked the roads. So the situation is really volatile and it is very uncertain. It is like very violent in West Bank, and here you need to be clear about the whole issue between Israel and Palestine. Where is West Bank located? Where is the Gaza Strip located? And also all the important geographical regions surrounding Israel, Palestine. Then we have other countries like Syria, Jordan, Turkey surrounding that region. So that is very, very important for us. So what happens if you don't link your PAN and Aadhaar card by 31st of March, which is the deadline? So recently we saw the Central Bank of Direct Taxes. It has asked all the taxpayers to link their permanent account number with their Aadhaar by 31st March, and any non-compliance will mean that PAN will become inoperative from 1st of April. So if you fail to link your PAN card and Aadhaar, your PAN number will become inoperated. So inoperative. So it is very important that you get it linked at the first place. So here we are trying to understand what are the consequences if you fail to link your PAN and Aadhaar by 31st March. So what is actually the rationale behind linking PAN with Aadhaar? So it announced the linking, basically the income tax department has announced the linking of PAN with Aadhaar after it came across instances where multiple PAN numbers were allotted to one person, or where one PAN was allotted to more than one person. So in order to ensure that such instances they are not repeated in future, so they came up with this decision of linking your PAN with Aadhaar, because obviously everyone has one Aadhaar number, and this was basically ensuring that when your PAN card is linked with your Aadhaar number, so obviously you would be having only one PAN, and obviously single PAN would not be allotted to a number of persons at the same time. So to have a robust way of deduplication of the PAN database, it was made mandatory for a taxpayer who is eligible to obtain Aadhaar to quote his Aadhaar in the application form for the PAN and the return of income. So who actually needs to link your PAN with the Aadhaar? So as per the circular that was issued by CBDT, so the Income Tax Act, it makes it mandatory for every person who has been allotted a PAN as on 1st July 2017 to intimate his or her Aadhaar number so that Aadhaar and PAN, they can be linked. And who is not required to link the PAN with Aadhaar? So there are few categories of the individuals for whom this linkage is not compulsory. However, they can do it if they wish to. So any person of age 80 years and above, they are exempted, and a non-resident as per the IT Act, and a person who is not a citizen of India. So they don't have to get linked. So what would happen if you fail to link your PAN with Aadhaar? So the major implications of non-compliance would be, person shall not be able to file the income tax return using the inoperative PAN, because obviously your PAN number would become inoperative. Then pending returns will not be processed, and pending refunds cannot be issued to the inoperative PANs. Then pending proceedings, as in the case of the defective returns, they cannot be completed, and tax will be required to be deducted at a higher rate if PAN becomes inoperative. So these would be the consequences. And besides these consequences, the person may face difficulties in other financial transactions, such as even with your banks. And as PAN is an important KYC criterion for these transactions, so obviously you might be facing some difficulties even in carrying out digital transactions. and how to get it linked. So one can link PAN and Aadhaar by clicking on the link Aadhaar option, which is available on the official website of the Income Tax Department. And here it is the website. So you can go on the website and you can get your PAN card and Aadhaar linked. So here we're talking about the India-Australia relationship, since it is in news and we are having the Australian Prime Minister in India. So in recent years, the relationship has charted a new trajectory of transformational growth. So we have seen a transformational growth between two countries, and the two countries are important partners in the Indo-Pacific, no doubt, and they cooperate closely in a wide range of sectors. So here we're talking about the historical perspective, what are the strategic ties, the China factor, then wide cooperation in terms of like economic cooperation, people to people ties, education, defense cooperation, and clean energy. So you have the answer in front of you. This is, we can say, a completely framed answer as well, proper structured. So you can just go through it because it's been like the video has become a little lengthy. So you can just go through these different headings and try to understand how the relationship has evolved over a time period. So what are the implications of bringing cryptocurrencies under the PMLA ambit? So we are very clear with what has been RBI's stand regarding cryptocurrencies, and I have already like discussed this thing in short. So Union Finance Minister's move to bring in the virtual digital assets under the money laundering law is aimed at widening the taxation and regulatory net and giving teeth to agencies along with bringing it in line with the Financial Action Task Force norms. So what exactly did the ministry do? So on 7th March, the Finance Ministry issued a notification bringing the transactions involving crypto assets under the Prevention of Money Laundering Act, because obviously we have certain investors and traders who are investing into cryptocurrencies, so they would now be liable under the Prevention of Money Laundering Act, and it laid out the nature of the transactions to be covered under this act. So these are basically, it would be involving the exchange between the virtual digital assets and the fiat currencies, exchange between one or more forms of the virtual assets, then transfer of virtual digital assets would be there, safekeeping or administration of virtual digital assets or instruments, enabling control over the virtual digital assets. So all these things would be covered under this act. So why this move? So the measure is expected to aid the investigative agencies in carrying out action against the crypto firms and bring uniformity in the rules ahead of the upcoming FATF assessment of India in May. So we've also seen some of the instances like how cryptocurrencies, they have been used, they have been misused in certain cyber attacks. Apart from that, there was one incidence of insider trading and in case of the popular WazirX exchange. So the basically then ED has to like it had to froze the bank account, the bank balances of the popular WazirX exchange. So we saw several brokers in cryptocurrencies who emerged suddenly. So what is the legal status of crypto in India right now? So in the union budget last year, even though the government brought in a tax for the cryptocurrencies, but it did not proceed with framing the regulations. And earlier, the RBI had proposed a ban that was again set aside by the Supreme Court. And in July last year, flagging the RBI's concerns, Finance Minister told the Parliament that international collaboration would be needed for any effective regulation or ban on cryptocurrencies. So from April 2022, India introduced a 30% income tax on gains that are made from cryptocurrencies. And from 2022 July, rules regarding 1% tax deducted at source on cryptocurrencies that came into effect. So we came up with taxation of the cryptocurrencies, the profits that were made from its trading and investment. So how is the notification being viewed by the industry? So publicly, the cryptocurrency industries, they have largely welcomed the move. Internally, however, there are concerns that the notification does not offer entities time to adhere to the fresh norms. So there's very less time to adhere to the norms, and the industry is also concerned that in absence of a central regulator, crypto entities could end up dealing directly with the enforcement agencies like ED. So obviously, we do not have any regulator for the cryptocurrencies. right now. So in February, the fuel demand, it rose by 5%. So we're coming back to normalcy after the COVID-19 pandemic. And obviously, this is one of the factors which point towards the fact that, yes, Indian economy is growing because the fuel demand is increasing. So we have already talked about the RBI's variable repo rate and why it is being used by RBI, why RBI is stepping into. So we have already discussed that in detail in the Financial Express. And that's all for today. Thank you for joining UPSC. Thank you for joining in Sarkari. And I hope that you've understood all the topics that we have discussed in detail. You'll be also getting the PDF link in the description box. And if you haven't subscribed to our channel, do go ahead and subscribe to it. And please like this video and also share it with your friends. And thank you for joining us today.